So next up, we've got sort of professors. And I thought this would be good because, well, A, these are the people that are going to be grading your exams. So you might want to know what they think and what they want to see on exams. But also wanted to do it to give you, so that you guys would know they're not these sort of like, you can't talk to them, cloistered priesthood kind of things where they're in like dark robes and chanting up in the like third floor of the law school with smoke and incense and that kind of stuff. Although maybe you are. I don't go to your office all the time. But because that's one of the things that we're really known for. You've already heard it several times, unprompted by me and uncompensated, to say that our faculty is really accessible. So, this time is going to be things like, what do they look for in exams? What's the difference between the students that get the best grades and the students that don't, and stuff like that. So be thinking about questions like that. And we're one more. Our buddy, Mr. Camp, is MIA. So, but he was at lunch, right? Who sat at Professor Camp's table at lunch today? You don't all have to raise your hand because I know at least 4 of you did. So, all right. Everybody's sleepy. That's fine. I think because it's just 2 of you and you guys know your histories and your pasts better than I do, I'll let you introduce yourself. So, Allison, do you want to go first since you were already sort of pre-introduced to everybody a little while ago? And I guess let's add one. I'll do this one sort of thing. What was your, this one interesting fact about yourself kind of thing, but I won't do that. I won't make you pick. I'll say, what was your main activity in high school? So add that to the end of your little thing there, because we were all nerds in high school, all of us.
My name is Allison Outenreith. I've been teaching here at the law school for just about 3 years. I'm about to finish up my 3rd year. Prior to coming here to teach, I worked at a firm in Dallas, Thompson & Knight, and I practiced in their tax department for about 11 years. So I'm a tax lawyer, and I teach tax courses here at the law school. I went to Texas Tech. I went here for law school, so I was very excited to get the opportunity to come back and teach. I loved Texas Tech. I love being at law school here, and it warms my heart every day I walk into law school and think about teaching here because I enjoyed my time here so much. For undergrad, I went to TCU. I grew up in the DFW area, and my father also went to TCU, and so that's where I went to undergrad. Let's see. My major activity in high school.
Have you seen Brian Campbell?
I was a baton twirler. I was a competitive baton twirler. And so I would go around to all these competitions, and so that was one of my main activities. I was also a cheerleader, and I was in the band. I played the oboe, and I think those are what I predominantly did.
Oboe?
Yeah, oboe's cool. It is one of the 2 double reed instruments for anyone out there that's a band person.
Everybody else can be fine with 1 reed. I don't know why you needed 2.
Anybody else an oboe?
Hey, be proud. 2 or 3.
Oh man, I wish I played an oboe. My name is Dustin Benham, and I am a civil procedure, evidence, skills, legal writing. I've taught across the spectrum here. Before I was a full-time law professor, I was a full-time lawyer. I practiced in Dallas, Texas at a large firm, Carrington, Coleman, Sloman, and Blumenthal, where I primarily practiced in the appellate and litigation areas, representing both individuals and large companies at their worst times, and had a lot of fun doing that. I loved being a lawyer. Teaching for me was something that came as a gift and an honor, and I was asked to come teach as a visitor at another law school for a year and eventually transitioned to Texas Tech. I've been here since fall of 2010. I am a Lubbock native. I went to Texas Tech for undergrad. And so I've just been thrilled to come back at this football renaissance that we're having. Sorry at all. I know we have Aggies in the crowd. We have Horns in the crowd. My wife is a Longhorn. Everybody's welcome here, but don't you love Cliff? Anyway, we have a divided household. We have a young baby too, and the baby's clothes alternate between burnt orange and red every football season, every day. But in any event, for my major activity in high school, I played football. I was a very, very poor football player. I didn't have the speed or I didn't have the speed or the skills to be a skills player, so they put me on the offensive line, which was a real problem when you're 180 pounds playing 5A ball. It was a real disadvantage, and so I was never much of a football player, but that's how I spent my time in activities.
Professor Kemp, you probably figured out that we're doing our own bios, and then at the end, it's what was your major activity in high school. So,
like most of the faculty here, I was a practicing lawyer. I practiced in local government law as an assistant county attorney for Arlington County, Virginia. I practiced in the federal level as an IRS attorney. IRS. Yeah, motto where service is the last word in our name. I did that for 8 years. I was in private practice for 2 years and couldn't stand it anymore. I just felt called to come teach because I am at bottom a nerd. My high school activities, you might guess, I'm 6 feet 5 foot tall, and so I always get the question, did you play basketball? And of course the answer was, well, yes, I did in 7th grade, where I was the 4th string center on a 3-string team. So my activity in high school was a sport, speech and debate.
that's a blood sport. It's a blood sport.
It's a great sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, blood sport, too. So I did parliamentary debating, I did cross-ex debating, I did speed debating, I also did poetry slams. That's when they were just starting. That was kind of fun. Oral, what they call extemporaneous. Lost that ability. But that was my high school. So, and then, law school and beyond.
So I guess the moral of the story is when you're picking your intramural sports teams here, don't go to the faculty, okay? We can help you with the oboe. We may help you with your legal questions, but basketball, football, I don't know.
So who has a question already? All right. Good job. Don't make me work. I'm not kidding.
I had a question about the curve on the classes.
Bum, bum, bum. Cut off her mic. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
The curve saves you.
What typically is the difference between the students who are not in the bottom 10% of the class? Because I know I talked to Dean Perez about typically the recommended curve the first year is that 10% of the class gets D pluses and below. And so I was wondering what the difference is between those students and the students who are less not successful.
Very diplomatic way of putting it.
Well, and I do think too, one, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, there is a distinction, and I don't know the precise numbers, but there's a distinction between the first year curve, which is closer to something like 10% DNF curve, and the upper level curve, which is 5%, right? That changes. And, I think that two things separate students at any level of the curve, and what separates them is analytical ability and writing ability. And there's a third ingredient that goes into developing both of those called work. And that's hard to measure on a test, right? Because some people have worked very hard at the end of the semester and they struggle because they're having an analytical difficulty despite that work. Other people could be brilliant students, but they're putting in their time at, chimneys or crickets, right? Or some fine watering holes down Broadway you should avoid. And they're putting in their time there rather than putting in the work. And as a professor reading the page, it's hard for me to tell what happened. But I think the biggest distinction is analytical ability and writing ability. Now, here's one thing that's important about law school. You can have superior analytical ability, and you still really need to work and concentrate on your writing. Because sometimes I see really brilliant, talented students whose performance is suppressed by the fact that they can't translate what's going on in their mind correctly into a format that I can assess as correct on the page.
And that's a reason why I teach first-year civil procedure. So my civil procedure exam is a 10-hour take-home. You go home, you get my email at 8 o'clock in the morning. After you stop crying, you start working on it. And it's exactly as Professor Benham said. When I'm reading those, and by the way, all of our grading is blind to the maximum extent possible. Obviously, in my small practice of procedure class, when I assign a memo, I know who are writing the memo. But on all of our first year, all of the exams, you're going to be graded blind. You have a number. And when you're reading these essays, I've had students who have been really smart, but completely incompetent at writing, and so they don't get the best grade. Now, that just means they need to work on that aspect. Likewise, I've had students who have got great writing ability, but they haven't quite caught on. There's a lot we teach you to think like a lawyer. That's the big phrase. And that means something. And Sarah, most students are going to get that everyone's going to get it by the time they graduate. But there's different degrees of quickness in which you catch on to this stuff. And exams are always somewhat arbitrary because they just measure what you're supposed to know at a certain time. Doesn't mean you're not going to learn it if you haven't gotten it at that point. So those are the, so what distinguishes the better exam from the worse exam is exactly as Professor Benham said. I think it's the analytical ability combined with the ability to express themselves. That might change second year. You may not be a top of the curve in the first year, but then you get it. And then, boom, you're off to the races second year.
Ditto. I agree with everything that's been said, and building upon that, building upon the analysis part and the critical thinking and the thinking like a lawyer, I would say in my classes, and I teach 2Ls and 3Ls, I don't teach first-year courses, so I have students that have gotten through first year and now they're in their second and third-year courses. One example that I can give that can distinguish someone from getting a top grade to not getting a top grade is when you get a fact pattern in an exam and the question is, you represent X, you are their lawyer, what do you advise them as the particular issue outlined in the fact pattern? It's not a regurgitation anymore of everything that you've learned in the entire semester. You boil it down to, you represent X, these are the issues, and I advise X this way and for these reasons. I don't care anything about anything else, and I don't want a whole entire history of what we learned in class. It is critical analytical thinking with respect to the question asked. And so that's, building upon the analysis, that's an example I think to give.
And in my first year exams, I edit each of the exam responses, and I write a 2 or 3 page memo to each student, telling them what they did well and where they need to improve. And because my belief is that the examination is not just an assessment tool, it's a learning tool. And I think various professors in this school also share my philosophy on that. Certainly your first year legal practice faculty share that philosophy. And one of the reasons and one of the wonderful programs we have here is it's not legal writing, it's not just legal research, it's legal practice. And it's a very intense and a course where you have multiple feedbacks. You get multiple feedback on your progress as you're learning how to do this writing part that goes into your exams.
Yeah, for those of you taking notes, that's a great piece of advice is to once you get your exams, go and set up a meeting with the professor. If they don't have an open door policy, just make a meeting and that kind of thing. Because that's not something that everybody does, and that's not something that's part of the culture at a lot of law schools. I remember I don't think I saw any of my exams all 3 years where I went to law school. There was entire bookshelves outside the faculty offices with boxes that had all the exams, and they stayed there for like 2 or 3 years, and then they threw them all away. I didn't know anybody that went and looked over their exams afterwards. Maybe they did, and they just tried to keep it. They didn't want to be called nerds or whatever, but we're all nerds. You got to own it. But that's how you learn, right? I mean, those of you that are taking intensive writing, that are history majors and stuff, how do you learn how to write? Do you just, if you get an A on your paper or a C, does that tell you what you did wrong or how to improve? No, you got to go and talk to the folks that do the grading and find out exactly what you need to improve. So next question. Yeah. What about the cheap seats? How about you guys up there? Any questions? You can write them and like throw them down here and hit me on the head with them or something? Oh, okay, I'll repeat it for you.
So for our first-year courses, how many exams should we be expecting per class?
So the question was in the first year, like how many exams will you have per class? So like will you have just one final or midterms and a final, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Typically, it's one.
one at the end. Now, in some years when I'm feeling perky, I give quizzes. I don't call them that. I call them comprehension exercises. But it doesn't count for much. And here's the reason why, at least in the first year curriculum, it's 1. My upper level course, I teach tax. Professor Alton-Reith and I are tax geeks. Yes. And I give a midterm, and I also give a research exercise in my first year in my fundamental income tax course. That's a required course, by the way. But in the first year, here's why I don't give more assessments than one at the end of the year, and that's because there's so much for you to learn, and integrating that knowledge is what we're looking for. So I don't really care to test you on your ability to read a particular rule of civil procedure the third weekend. What I want you to do, and what I want you to focus on the whole semester, is learning how to integrate, how to read a case, how to integrate that with reading the rule, how to apply that to the facts of a particular situation and come to some reasoned conclusion about how those rules in the prior cases apply to those facts. And that just takes time to learn. And so I don't really think it's fair on students to start assessing them too early. Remember, to me, an assessment is just what you know at one point in time. So to me, for the first year, I think you almost need that whole semester to figure out what we're trying to do with you to teach you how to think like a lawyer. So we have 1 assessment at the end of the year. It's really quite a sea change from most of your prior schooling experience, and then you get used to it. And so then you take a class like over in the B school or over in some other part of campus, and they're doing multiple assessments in the semester, and you go, what is this? Don't do this. No.
Very annoyed.
Yeah, very annoying. Why just don't bother me till the end of the semester?
Somebody down here. Yeah.
I know you said the curve changes from 1L to 2 and 3, but how rigorous is the curve? Like a school that I was at said that 5 people usually roughly get A's per class.
The curve is, first of all, and you know, the faculty handbook at this institution, state institution, anybody can look at it and see what how our curve works. There's a set of rules that govern us. At the outset, the faculty curve is advisory. I mean, we are theoretically, I guess, not bound by it, but I'm going to tell you in practice we follow it, right? We follow the curve, and particularly with respect to those A's. A's are few and far between in law school, and that's the reality at any law school, or most of the law schools that you're going to be encountering. So we follow it rigorously, but if in a certain semester have I varied from the curve for a student in a particular exceptional circumstance? Absolutely. Other semesters, have I followed it down to the student? Absolutely, and I think that's more the norm. At least that's my perception.
Yeah, we have shaming events for professors who don't follow the curve. It is cultural. It is not. You cannot tell a tenured faculty member what the hell to do. So the curve is advisory. But that said, there are good reasons for it. For example, there are 4 sections of the first year civil procedure course. It's not fair for students in Section 1 to be subject to a different curve on grades than Section 4. So we, as colleagues, get together and say, look, we're going to follow that faculty handbook because it makes it more fair for the students to have that curve applied uniformly. The curve also, you might want to know, applies in larger classes. Statistically, if you have a class of less than about 20, it doesn't make sense to curve. So I teach, for example, a legal history course, a seminar on legal history, where we get together, we sit around the table, we do enormous amounts of reading, and then we chat about 17th and 18th century legal cases. It's a lot of fun, but how on earth am I going to curve 12 students? So we I just tell them at the beginning, I say, I'm going to run this like an upper-level graduate school history seminar, and we let the grades fall where they lie. So in that case, there is no curve. We also used to have a practice, I think we're coming back to the practice, of distributing to students grade distributions for every class. I think that information is public. I think it's available on the Texas Tech website for all courses. So I think we used to do that because it wasn't publicly available, and now it is, and so you can go get that information. But you can find out. So if you're looking at, second, third year, you got to bump up that GPA. You want to find a small seminar or a small course that's not going to be subject to the curve. Go look up the professor's history and see if that is a professor who tends out to give higher grades. It does tend to work that way. And you know why? Because most of you all are perfectly smart, and you're hard workers. And so when you get a group like that, and I love teaching my seminar because I get 12 very bright people who are intensely interested in the subject. Of course they're going to get good grades because that's who they are. The curve is in some sense artificial. It suppresses, right? If you have a bunch of geniuses, they can't all get A's. But as I said before, the curve also saves you. You'll understand when you take federal income tax what I mean.
And here's the thing about the curve, right? The average the suggested average is 2.7. Over the last few years, it's kind of creeps up. It's been closer to 2.8. That's sort of the middle, right? Which is about like 3 B's and a C or something like that. So there's for a lot of you type A's that are always used to getting A's, that is going to be a shock to you because you're going to be like, I got a B, and you're supposed to be happy with that, right? So that's going to be an adjustment. But the curve, what you'll notice is as you go up the rankings, the top schools have very, very high grading curves. The law school I went to, the grading, the middle was a 3.2, and when I graduated, they raised it to a 3.4. So
at UT, they've actually started going up to 4.5 as the top grade
So
because I think it's a 3.5 median for their first year curves.
Yeah. So some schools have A pluses. We don't. Like you can get into the weeds with a lot of that stuff about trying to figure out.
We don't. Baylor doesn't. The new A&M doesn't.
Right.
I mean,
so what I'm trying to say is that like those top schools, they try to give everybody high grades because it's like, hey, we're all smart, right? So those students put their GPAs on their resumes because they have a 3.2 GPA. That sounds good, so that's what they put. They don't tell anybody that they're in the bottom quarter of their class, right? Most of the other law schools, the law school I used to work at, had a curve about like ours. Most of them are at about where we are. Those students will put class rank instead of the GPA. And so in that way, that sort of levels the playing field a little bit so that because a lot of times if you're over a 3.0 here, you're probably in the top third of the class. So you would put that on your resume, that you were in the top third of the class. And that communicates the same information. Schools I know there was a school in L.A., in your neck of the woods that caught a lot of flack because they raised the curve, and they also did it retroactively for graduates. They would reissue new transcripts with the new grades. So because the complaint is, well, but we're competing against UCLA, and they all have high grades. You need to give us high grades, not we need to learn more. You just need to give us better grades so that we look better.
Can I jump in here too? Let me tell you because I work with a lot of employers in Texas's larger cities. Let me tell you, they care about rank across the board. They care about rank at Texas. And they care about rank everywhere with the exception of a few very elite schools at the very top of the food chain, national law schools, and I'm talking the Harvards, Yales, et cetera. By the way, Yale doesn't even give grades, right? It's pass or fail.
But they still have a hierarchy at Yale, and the employers look very closely at Yale grads. Did they get the pass plus or the pass?
Right.
Or the pass minus?
Employers care about rank. So when you're looking at grade curves across law schools, that's actually irrelevant to a lot of employers as they search for qualified candidates. They're going to be interested in your rank. And I'll tell you that I could not tell you my law school GPA. I can tell you what my rank is, right? Because that's what has mattered in my life and in my profession, not what my GPA is.
And I can't tell you either one because I've just forgotten in the phase of alcohol.
Well, when it wasn't a grade, right? It was like a cuneiform symbol or something, probably, or no?
Okay, so some of you are maybe thinking, like, well, what if I'm not in the top? Right? What if I'm in the bottom rank? What do I do then? And that's a great question. Glad you asked that. And the answer is that employers hire for a bunch of different reasons. And there are a bunch of different skill sets that you will be learning here that aren't necessarily reflected in the skill sets that we assess in your courses. And that's part of what makes this school a little bit special, is that we recognize a lawyer I mean, the way I put it is, to be a great litigator, you got to be a little bit stupid, because you have to be focused on your client's story. You can't get distracted by things like facts and law, the things that we grade you on in law school, right? So actually, that's why the C students are the best litigators, and litigators know that. So if you're, when you're getting hired, but we understand, Professor Benhams works hard to find folks to get placements for our interns. He has incredible experience talking to people who employ tech grads. They love tech grads because tech grads are not only hard workers, but they got skill sets that, it doesn't matter what your GPA is, your class rank. So if you have a low class rank, you emphasize those skill sets, and you get employers to make recommendations, and you work the field on recommendations and face-to-face and that kind of stuff. There's ways to do it, and we have a great career counseling services here. We have a great career service office, Paula Smith heading it. And then we have, of course, a lot of professors who will help you with that.
Next question.
Hello. So I know we've heard a lot about what tech has to offer, the positive things, but I kind of want to know, actually really like to know what you think tech's biggest academic weakness is and what the administration and the faculty is doing to rectify that weakness or make it less of a weakness for students.
Oh, probing questions. I like it.
Wow, great question.
Allison?
Is that your answer, Dustin? That's me.
You want to know our weakness? I'll tell you our weakness. We don't offer courses on Babylonian jurisprudence. I'm serious, right? One of my favorite courses at UVA was Roman law, because I'm a geek. I love Roman law. Roman slave law, Roman tax law. It was great stuff. We don't give you a course on that here.
I have a weakness. Sometimes your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, right? And I think that may be true for us here. One, I think, weakness we have, or I don't want to call it a weakness, a trap that we have. We have a lot of programs that you can get involved in as an upper-level student. A lot of top-ranked, high-quality programs. I think it's easy to come here. Let me put it this way. You come to some law schools, they're going to tell you what to be. The choice is going to be made for you because the law school produces litigators, or the law school produces environmental law people, right?
Vermont.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But the law school produces nerds.
Right. The law school produces nerds. At Tech, we have so many opportunities for upper level students. Sometimes I worry that people can spread themselves too thin in a way that's detrimental to the academic program. And what we're doing to rectify it, I don't know. I think that it's up to each individual student. I can tell you that we love our programs, and I don't see us.
Well, one thing we do is that if your grades are fine, that is, the assessment on your analytical and writing abilities, that's fine. Yeah, fine, go ahead. But we do now have some rules in place that if you're struggling academically, we're not going to let you do some of that stuff.
Right. And I think we continue to look at that.
Yeah.
We continue to look at that because, you have to come in here with priorities. And you know what your number one priority should be? To be a JD with a law license when you get out of here. Right? And to be a JD with a law license, you have to pass your classes and you have to pass the bar. And a lot of these activities are extremely beneficial in the eyes of employers. You can be a fantastic advocate. You can travel the country and win national moot court competitions. If you end up failing the bar because you were distracted or you weren't glued in, I think that you may have undercut your primary goal to focus on a secondary goal. So that's the one, that in my heart, that's where I see sometimes I wonder, do we allow students to make choices to spread themselves too thin? So let this come as a warning. When you're choosing your upper level activities, when you're choosing what to participate in, you need to pick the top one or two things you really care about and not try to flood your resume with every single possible option. You can only do so many things well.
Right.
So pick your priorities and do those well, and then your school will probably turn out well as well.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Law school is difficult. It is extremely difficult. It takes a lot of time. I devoted my whole entire 3 years to studying all the time. That is what I did because I wanted to come here and do well. And it is for me at least, it was totally different from the way I would have ever studied in undergrad. I had to devote just every waking moment
It's a full-time
to
job.
studying. It is a full-time job, and that is exactly the way to look at it. I'm reading, analyzing. It's not just skimming anymore, your textbooks. You are reading them over and over and analyzing them and thinking about them. And it's just a whole different ballgame, and it takes a lot of work. And I think it's definitely right. You can put yourself it can hinder your abilities grade-wise the more activities that you get involved in. So I would agree with that, what Dustin said.
Back row, how are we doing back here? Any questions?
By the way, that was a fantastic question. I mean, and look, this is what every law school you're considering, you need to be asking those kind of critical questions. So thank you.
And I'll follow up to make sure you asked all the other schools that question, too, just to make sure. Anything? Okay.
So obviously bar passage is extremely, I'm going to assume, extremely important to most of us. I know the first year, you're kind of told what to take, you do that, you get through your first year. How do bar classes work past that? Are students given a list of, these are bar classes, take and pick what you want from it? Are you given a list of classes, you have to take these and then you choose the rest of your classes on top of that? How does that system work, and how do y'all handle that situation?
Do you know what our upper level requireds are?
I don't know what they are, so don't feel bad.
In our curriculum for your second and third year, there are what are called advanced required courses. So there are required courses that you must take in the course of being a second and third year student. And typically, if not most, if not all of them, are your bar related subject matters.
And that's not why we require them. We require them because our goal is to produce well-rounded, ethical lawyers ready to go out and practice. And so if you're going to do that, you need to know evidence, not because you're going to be a trial lawyer, but because there may be something that you're doing that will end up in litigation, and you need to know what the rules of evidence are so you can think about ahead of time preserving it. You need to know tax, because it impacts every single area of law. You're not going to be a tax lawyer, but gosh, if you've just won a $3 million verdict for your client and you get 40%, you may want to understand about structured settlements.
And you will want to know wills and trusts, because every family member will ask you to prepare a will and handle the probate when somebody passes away.
Don't do it. Don't represent your I'm sorry, we have parents in the audience. Don't represent your family.
So that said, the upper level required curriculum really sort of sets you up for that. In addition, there are courses we offer that are targeted towards subjects that are assessed on the bar. Texas Civil Practice is one of them. You'll get that information from fellow students and also from the registrar's office, and also probably Cassie will be able, Professor Christopher will be able to give you a lot of direction, should you seek it, from her about how to structure your curriculum.
And to give you some context in that, Tech has more required courses in the upper division than other law schools in Texas. Most law schools usually 3 classes, a professional responsibility, which is required by everybody by the ABA, an upper division writing requirement that can be fulfilled in a lot of different classes, and usually there's some other one. We have, 6 required courses?
And I'll say that's true with the University of Texas. I will say that a lot of other schools in Texas do have substantial required curriculums, and it just depends. It's school to school, and some schools actually have more onerous required curriculums than us. So I think it's a judgment call for each school.
And we do have more credits required, I think, than we have 90, and some of the other ones have 86
Sure.
and that kind of thing. But most of those classes, like you heard, they're classes that you should take anyway, and that most students take anyway. Business entities, those are sort of like foundational bedrock courses that people take. Even I took business entities, and I've never been a lawyer in my life, but you take these classes because they're important, and I passed the bar, and all that kind of stuff. But anything? I'll ask okay. I could ask a question by the time I get all the way up there. I'm just kidding. You want to meet me halfway? I'm just kidding. I should work out. I haven't worked out this week because I was preparing for you guys. Go ahead.
First off, this is like my second time to ever speak into a microphone. It feels nice.
You're not going to start singing "Don't Stop Believing," are you?
No,
Okay.
no. Y'all don't want to hear me sing. I've been out of academia for a while, to the point where I've actually been a welder for a year, and most of the words I use on a daily basis are either monosyllabic or can't be said on TV. Do you guys have any recommendations for how, for those of us that have similar paths, can kind of mentally get ready for the rigors of law school and having to think academically again?
I do, and I think that this is something for everybody in the room, whether you're coming from a career, coming back to school, or whether you're coming directly from school. Over this summer and the remainder of the spring, you need to be reading, and not just reading Us Weekly or publications.
Or Divergent.
Right. Really, you know, what I recommend, when people ask me what should I be doing, I say you need to be reading, and I would recommend reading a substantial portion of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, depending on your political persuasion, every day. And I picked those two publications out. There are plenty of publications, but you need to be reading something that's written well enough that the sentence structures and the quality of the writing helps you and doesn't hurt you when you show up here. So in other words, you need to be reading quality writing. That would include well-written nonfiction from the New York Times bestseller list. That would include newspapers on a daily basis. Look, when I was in school, I would read, you know, there were a couple of news sources. At that time, you know, we had just a few online sources, like MSNBC.com used to be like a straight news source. And then there's the New York Times. I remember when I read the New York Times, it seemed particularly boring to me, the way it was written. And it's because it's a little bit more dense and more, sadly, it's better written, so that's why it was more boring. It was boring to me. But in any event, you need to be reading more challenging materials.
But not Proust.
Not Proust. No, that would take longer than a summer. So don't do that. But you know.
And really read it, right? We're all used to looking at our phone or looking at our computer and just skimming the news or just skimming and seeing the headline.
You're training for a marathon.
What Dustin is talking about is reading and absorbing and understanding where you can communicate and talk to someone about what you're reading and your thoughts about it and why and all those types of things.
And there's sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was going to say there's a collateral benefit, too. The people sitting in this room are part of the next generation of leaders of this state and of this country, right? And you need to be aware of world events going on. You need to be aware of national events, state events, things that are important in your community. What's amazing about sitting in front of a room like this, and it's the same when you're in front of a room of one else, there is a future U.S. congressman in this room. There is a future state legislator in this room. There's a future district attorney who's responsible for life and death decisions on a daily basis in this room. And I know as you sit out there, you hope that those people have a broad understanding of the world around them, right? You hope the people making the decisions at least understand the world in which they make the decisions. And you're joining that class and that group of people. And so I would encourage you to engage your world in a way that's a little bit deeper than Us Weekly and TMZ. And not saying that you do that. I'm thinking of myself. Anyway.
Twice you said Us Weekly. I'm
myself. Us Weekly's fine supplement. Okay, it's all about a supplement. But you know, be the leaders that you want to be leading you, right? And you're really joining a profession and a group of people who we expect to be responsible and knowledgeable. And I think that kind of reading and reflection furthers that.
Right. And just to, address folks who are coming in from the real world of work, I was only out 2 years before I went to law school. I was a computer programmer. And it's actually, I think, a great advantage to be coming to law school from the work world, because you understand what it means to get up at 6 or 7 and get to work, and then work hard until 5 or 6, take off, and rinse and repeat the next day. You know what that discipline feels like, and it's the kind of discipline you need to bring to law school. It is a marathon that you're going to be engaged in for 3 years. It's a lot of fun, and being a lawyer is a lot of fun, as well as being able to do a lot of good in the world. But it's the preparation for it. I think being out in the work world gives you a certain ability to prepare for law school that you may not fully realize until you come here. And students coming right out of undergrad have a harder adjustment to make in some sense. They're more familiar with the academic exercise, but they're not as familiar with the sort of ton of bricks work that's going to be loaded onto them. And that's, in some sense, a more difficult transition.
I agree. I also worked for 2 years before I went to law school, and I think it does give, going back to treating law school like a job, I think it gives, you're already in that frame of mind.
We're not trying to scare you away if you're coming right
No,
from
no, no,
undergrad.
no. I think you're already in that mindset of coming in and treating it like a job. And so for those going straight through, just knowing that too, that it really makes a difference to come in and treat it, and put the time into it as if it is your full-time job every day.
Allison, why do you teach?
I love teaching. Just a little bit more about my background. I practiced again for about 11 years, and I loved practicing too. I love being a practicing tax lawyer. I did predominantly tax transactional work, and I went out of law school and went to my particular firm where I was in Dallas, and I was there the whole time, and I loved it. I loved the firm. I loved the people. And I loved what I did. When the teaching opportunity arose and I thought about it, I thought about my various friends that had gone into teaching and how much they had talked about how much they love it and how fulfilling it is, and how much passion that you can have, that you want to create just great lawyers. And the firm where I was, as I progressed from associate to partner, and I served as hiring partner, and in the role of hiring partner, where I hired students, firm would, just like all large firms, travel across the country to all law schools, and you interview people and you recruit them and help them make the transition from law student to lawyer. I was working with law students a lot and loved it, and that became one of my favorite aspects of my job, is working with the law students and helping them transition into real-life practice. And so all those things together, when I had the opportunity to come interview for a teaching position, I thought it was perfect. But I loved practicing as well.
Dustin, you've taught at a couple of different places in the recent past. So what makes tech different as far as like the faculty and the culture and that kind of thing in your mind?
I think the biggest thing that makes tech different is the overall environment. And I'm not saying the lovely sunny day y'all are getting today. I'm saying
the dust that will come tomorrow.
Or the dust that will come tomorrow. I'm saying the environment of people, the culture of the people at this law school. And I think it's two-part. It's not just an open-door faculty, which we have. I mean, you're going to be able to find more faculty present in their offices, more available to you than any law school that you're probably considering. I think I can fairly say that after knowing people at many of the ones that you're probably considering. You're going to have access to faculty. That's just one part of the equation. We focus on that a lot because that's about us. One thing that I've noticed, though, is that what makes the law school great are the students and the way that they interact with each other. This faculty expects you to be collaborative. We set up an environment that's collaborative, that's both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And I'm going to tell you that some environments and the tone that is set by the faculty of some law schools encourages really
debilitating competitiveness.
Debilitating competitiveness. You know, one thing I'd ask you to look at.
We'd like you to be competitive. We're going to help you be competitive, but
has anyone seen the Princeton Review Most Competitive Law School ranking? You may have seen this on some forums. It's a really interesting ranking, and I challenge you to look at the schools on that ranking. And then when you look at that ranking, look at the criteria for getting that award. Some law schools win that award, and then every year they issue a press release that says, we've won again, most competitive law school. If you look at the criteria, it's actually a survey of student misery. It is. It flat out is. And I hope to never see tech on that law school. It's not competitive in the sense that the law school is competitive in the market against other law schools. It's competitive in the sense that the people there feel that they are locked in competition with their peers rather than enjoying the learning environment. So I think what makes tech special is you're going to come here, you will work hard. I'm not going to hide the ball. You're going to feel competition, right? You've heard about the curve. You will be competing. There's no doubt. But I feel that we do.
There's only so many slots on every journal. You're going to be competing for that.
Right. I mean, there is competition, but I feel that my students are happy, healthy, collaborative people with interests not only in school, but outside of school, which is really important. And I think all that comes together to make an environment where you're going to be able to focus on learning the material rather than the distraction of backbiting, fighting, pleasing unreasonable professors, although sometimes that will be a distraction. But in any event, for the most part, it's minimized. So I'd ask you to really ask questions about the environment you're going to be spending your time in, because you're going to be spending 3 years, and as Professor Camp mentioned very correctly, this is kind of an 8 in the morning to 6 at night, go eat dinner, do it some more for homework. I mean, you're going to be spending more hours with your colleagues in class than you've ever spent before. And you need to ask really tough questions about what that environment's like. I don't think this one can be beaten, and I think that's a product of both the students and the professors here.
Yeah. We have time for about 1 or 2 more questions.
Hi, I'd like to ask, I know everyone talks about how great the environment is, but how does that compare to the real world? Does it actually prepare us for how real lawyers are like?
Are people mean in the real world? I'm just kidding. Those of you in practice, I mean, I guess what she's getting at is, you know, was it all hunky-dory here in law school and then you went to Thompson and Knight or wherever in the prosecutor's office it was cutthroat and backbiting and then you were sort of not prepared? Or is that kind of what you're kind of getting at there a little bit?
You come out of here balanced. You know, so, and I think like tends to attract like. So if you come out, I mean, first of all, in terms of skill sets, we try to hit all the skill sets you need as a lawyer, and including the analytical and writing, but including the ability to negotiate, to listen. Listening is is a hard skill to learn. All of those are skills that you need to be a good, effective, practicing lawyer. And you come out balanced. You probably will not be attractive to a firm that's filled with backbiting, naysayers who are really into every competition they can think of. You may not be attracted to that firm either. So I think like attracts like. I don't know if that addresses the question.
Well, as we're running out of time, there was one thing. Are we running? I want to.
2 or 3 minutes, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to give one plug, building on what Brian was saying about creating balanced lawyers, and that equating to creating lawyers that are collegial and also going out there and being able to hit the ground running. When you hear the term creating practice-ready lawyers is the aim of what we would like to do. Something that always resonates warmly in my heart is the firm where I was in Dallas. Consistently, partners would say, I like working with Texas Tech lawyers because they just get it. And many people would say that. And what they meant by that was you could assign a first-year attorney, someone straight out of school from Texas Tech, an assignment, go research this and write a memo, or go amend this agreement and add these provisions, whatever the case may be, and they could do it. They just got it, and they could do it, which wasn't always the case with students from other law schools that needed more.
You'd ask them to write a memo, and they'll give you a treatise on Babylonian slavery law.
They needed more hand-holding, and, I can remember one particular partner that I worked with. He only worked with Texas Tech lawyers, and that is the reason why. And so I wanted to make sure that I was able to tell that story, because I think it's a great thing to take away with respect to our law school here.
And I want to say one thing in response to your question. It's a good question. Hey, the world is tough. Lawyers are tough. And I can promise you, you may come out of here collegial, but you will be tough when you leave this institution, period. I wish we had a class. I wish I was teaching trial ad today. We've been working on cross-examination in my trial ad class. Come sit through one of my cross-examinations or one of my students' cross-examinations. You'll see tough. There are a lot of lawyers out there, though, who mistake being aggressive with being tough,
right?
With being poorly behaved with being tough, right? With being uncivil with being tough,
being unprofessional.
Right.
and
It doesn't mean you treat your support staff badly or your secretary badly.
Yell at the clerk.
Oh gosh, that's.
And I think the finest lawyers out there are collegial. They're the kind of people you'd want to go to lunch with, but at the end of the day, they can draw a line in the sand and stand absolutely rock solid firm behind their clients' interests. That's the kind of lawyers that Texas Tech produces. And I'll tell you, just an anecdote. One time I went to a law school that was the opposite of this environment, and we were treated particularly poorly in a class one day, and we were all in the law review office after this class, and people were arguing about whether it was justified or not. And someone was saying, well, yeah, that's what the real world's like, though, right? People are bad to you. That's what the real world's like. And the editor-in-chief of the law review said something that I've never forgotten. He said, you know what? The real world's like a lot of things. I might get mugged in the parking lot. Let's not practice in this office, okay? And I think that's right. You're going to encounter bad, aggressive, uncivil, problematic lawyers. That's not who we want you to be if you come to this institution.
Cool. Well, with that, I think thank the panel. That was great.